And so we are very happy to have Casey Carter here to talk to us about assessing habitat value for bumblebees in northern Illinois.
Yeah, thank you for letting me be here today. Yeah, I was kind of nervous following up those talks because my presentation is going to be wildly different than those, but equally as important. So as introduced, my name is Casey Carter. I'm located at the Illinois Natural History Survey in Champaign-Urbana, and I am the pollinator ecologist on staff.
The microphone just a little bit more.
Sure.
Thank you.
So just a quick roadmap of what this presentation is going to look like. I'm going to talk to you all a little bit about the Urban Biotic Assessment Program at the Illinois Natural History Survey, what we do, why we do those things. And then I'm going to give you a brief overview of the rusty patch bumblebee status in Northern Illinois and some tools that we use to kind of assess the habitat value for them, and important floral resources for those bees in Northern Illinois. And then I'm going to use the Fox River watershed as an example of how we use those tools. And in my opinion, I think this watershed is a stronghold for this bee. So the Urban Biotic Assessment Program is nested within the PACE Lab, otherwise known as the Population and Community Ecology Lab. It's co-led by Dr. Mike Dreslick and Asya Rollin. And what we do is we work with the State Toll Highway Authority, who manages nearly 300 miles of toll roads in Northern Illinois. And what we do with them is we work with them for their environmental reporting requirements in their construction zones and maintenance areas. And we do this because they want to be compliant with the IDNR and with the Endangered Species Act. And so what we do is we go through these tollways and we look for threatened, endangered, and sensitive species. So this relationship between Tollway and INHS actually started in 2005, where we were asked to go and monitor the endangered Blandings turtle population that was thought to be affected by the expansion of the toll road I-355. And since then, our partnership has expanded pretty exponentially, and we have now recorded well over 300 species within a mile buffer zone of all of these tollway corridors. So the way that we do that is we have different programs within the umbrella program, and we study anything between mussels and mollusks, fish, pollinators, birds, you name it, we probably have a person doing it. And within each of these programs, we have a taxa lead who's responsible for the threatened, endangered, and sensitive species within each of those taxa groups. So as the pollinator ecologist, it's my responsibility to monitor not only the ecology, but also the threats and distribution of the rusty patch bumblebee, as well as a group of noctuid moths. They're stem-borer moths in the genus Paphiopema. And today I'm just going to be talking about the rusty patch bumblebee, otherwise known as Bombus affinis. And if you have questions about Paphiopema, I'm happy to field those in the Q&A. But as you can see here, this is the historic range of the rusty patch bumblebee, and it is pretty extensive in the Northeast and the Midwest. And it gets its name because it has the characteristic rusty orange patch on the second abdominal section in the workers and the males. And so the reason why we're talking about this bee today is because it was the first bee that was listed under the Endangered Species Act. So it was listed because it's thought to have shrunk in its range by 80 to 90%. And so this bee, again, was listed as federally endangered in 2017. And so there's no single reason why we are seeing these declines. It's more so death by 1,000 cuts. And the major culprits are habitat loss, pesticide exposure, and pathogens. And as I alluded to, this is the current range of the rusty patch bumblebee. So the red areas here are the known occurrences that we've seen in the last couple of years. And the yellow areas are called low potential zones because they're presumed to be there because they're adjacent to the areas that we've been seeing them on a regular basis. And then the blue areas are the historic sightings that we have seen in the last couple of decades. And you may be thinking, well, what does the tollways in Northern Illinois and the distribution of this bee have in common? Well, as you can see here, this is an overlay of the toll roads in the northern part of the state and the current range. And you can see that there's quite a bit of overlap between the two. So a question that I ask myself when thinking about assessing habitat for these bumblebees is, what are the best tools that we can use in order to not only provide effective land management strategies for these bees, but also those that the Tollway can understand and implement? And this can be a kind of a tricky question because, like many insects, this bee has what's called an annual life cycle. So the queen will emerge early in the spring and she will found a colony. And that means she'll produce many workers to go and forage for nectar and pollen to support the larvae that she is tending to. And then later in the fall, she will produce reproductive females called gynes, and they will overwinter and do the process all over again the next year. And so it's tricky because this bee not only needs access to food, good quality habitat for forage, but also good quality habitat for their nesting and overwintering. But my research predominantly focuses on the foraging habitat for this bee. And the tool that I use most is called network analysis. And so network analysis is basically a fancy term for constructing food webs. And what this does is it takes your observational data that you're collecting in the field. So your bees are foraging on plants, and I'm taking that and putting it into a statistical software to turn it into a visual. And so the utility of these networks is you can actually quantify the number of interactions that you're seeing in the field, but also the number of interacting species, the organization of these relationships, and how often these relationships are occurring both spatially and temporally. And I think this is a really good tool for management because the observational surveys actually tell you who's on the landscape. So it tells you what bees and plants are present at your site. And then the network analysis can quantitatively tell you who is interacting with what. So what bees are interacting with what plants most often and how these are organized. And then combined, this data is a really good way to tell land managers, well, we found this interaction to be really important on your landscape. You should probably maintain it. And then also, if you're wanting to support sensitive species, we have information to provide them what plants to plant. And if there's a sensitive species nearby that you want to encourage in to your landscape, we can tell you what plants to plant to encourage them. So an example of how we use this, you can actually delineate these by any one variable that you see appropriate. And here, being in Northern Illinois, we're thinking about urban sprawl often. So how does urbanization influence these bee and plant networks? And I know this looks pretty daunting, but it's pretty easy to understand once you actually know what you're looking at. So this is just the networks that we've created through delineating the landscape by the percent of development in the area. So low just means that it's your more natural areas, and high means it's pretty urban. So the thing that I want you to get out of this slide is just how busy and how much noise is going on in the really low developed areas compared to the high developed areas. And generally, busyness is good in biology. And so with the information in the network analysis, it provides you with a statistics that is kind of in the back. And so what you can do with that information is you can plot it in space to figure out the functional importance of different species in your network at large. And the reason why we do that is to figure out which species contribute most to the overall stability in your network, which plants and bees are maybe sensitive to disturbance and eventually extinction, like we're seeing with the rusty patch bumblebee, as well as what species interact within and across your entire community. And so with all this information combined, we can really hone in on the most important plants for bumblebees. And we use this type of information to recommend the best plants across all networks. Example here with the high developed areas, we have some invasive species and that could be problematic. And so we can actually tell land managers, well, this is really important in your networks and maybe consider some alternatives to that plant that serves a similar role. And also we can try to transition landscapes that are in pretty poor quality to a higher quality area with, your foundational plant species. So like I said earlier, I want to use the Fox River watershed as an example of how we apply these networks. And this is a map of my current locations where I'm doing pollinator surveys. And this is since 2022. And then the blue region here is the Fox River watershed. And so as you can see here, there are 8 sites in common that we go and survey for on a pretty routine basis. And those are predominantly in Kane and Cook counties in Illinois. So just in summary, we collected nearly 2,300 bees in between a 2-year period, that being 2023 and 2025. And excitingly, we detected 10 of the 11 known species of Northern Illinois. And excitingly, we found the rusty patch bumblebee and 2 of the 3 species of greatest conservation need in Illinois, the American and the half-black bumblebee. And as I alluded to earlier, I think the fox can be a really good area for an example for management because it's, in my opinion, a stronghold for the rusty patch bumblebee. This is a heat map for where we've found the rusty patch in Northern Illinois. And as you can see, it's relegated predominantly in, the northern part of the state near Rockford and in the Fox River. So just some context about why I think the fox can be a stronghold for the rusty patch. Between 2023 and 2025, we recorded 151 rusty patch bumblebees in all of the tollways combined. And 66 of those were in the 8 sites that were listed. So nearly 45% of the rusty patches that we have recorded in Northern Illinois has been found within the Fox River watershed. And notably, it's really important because we've been finding each life history stage of the rusty patch in the Fox River. So we know that they're using the landscape for nesting, overwintering, and foraging. And so to put everything together, this is the plant pollinator network that I constructed out of the interactions that we recorded in the field within those 8 sites. And so to just get into how these work, so on your bottom node here, you have all of the plant species that you've seen and interacting with the bee species on the top node. And the width of these lines indicate how many of those bees you've seen or plants you have seen in your entire landscape. And similarly, the width of these green lines indicate how frequently those 2 respective partners were interacting with one another. And so as a result, there's a few things that I want to highlight here. So Monarda fistulosa, this is bee balm, and this is in a lot of restorations and native prairies. It was most supportive to every single bumblebee in the network, and it supported them at pretty high rates, as you can see. The second thing that I want to highlight is Cercium muticum. This is swamp thistle, and it was ranked pretty high in a statistic called a sensitivity value. And basically, that means that it interacted with a particular bee more often than it interacted with the entire population. And in this specific scenario, it interacted more often with the rusty patch bumblebee compared to all of the other bumblebees in your network. So we know that this is really important for foraging for the rusty patch. In that same vein, we see that Virginia bluebells were really important for the two-spotted bumblebee. And this is probably because the two-spotted bumblebee is one of the earliest emerging bee species that we have in Northern Illinois. So Virginia bluebells are also an early blooming species. So we know that that plant is really foundational in their foraging. And lastly, we have red clover, which it ranked highest in what's called your ranked partners stat. And all that means is it supported the most bumblebee species, and it supported an equal representation of visitations across all of those species. So red clover is a non-native species, and because we know that it supported several different bumblebees in our network, that might be a good place to start for suggesting alternatives that fit a similar role. And when we use this information to plot out in space what are the important functional players in our network, we are given these 4 plants. So Verbena stricta, that's hoary vervain, Monarda fistulosa, bee balm, and we have 2 Joe Pye weeds here. And so we know that these 4 plants are really foundational and important for not only a group of bumblebees, but also important for a particular time of year. And so the golden question that I get all the time is, well, what do we plant for rusty patch? What do we plant for bumblebees? And the information that we get from the network analysis can be really particular about the plants that you plant for specific bees or the bumblebee community broadly. But in this case, we're going to hone in on the rusty patch bumblebee. And the network analysis actually showed these 6 plants being incredibly important for this bee. And it's important for their entire phenology. So we have Virginia bluebells, we have raspberry, we have sweet Joe Pye weed, Culver's root, swamp thistle, and swamp goldenrod. So if you were to ask me right now, which plants should we plant in the Fox River watershed to preserve this bee species, it would be these 6. So with that, I would like to thank our sponsors, the Illinois Tollway and the Illinois Natural History Survey, and you all for being here and engaging in this conversation, because we're all very fond of this watershed and trying to preserve it. So with that, I would like to field any questions that you may have.
Thoughts on lousewort? Would that mean as a spring, early season nectar?
Yeah.
It's not very common, but I see tons of butterflies on it. I'm sorry, tons of butterflies on it.
Yeah, so the question was about lousewort. And yeah, those plants are in really high quality areas. So you're probably standing in a remnant when you see that. But outside of the Virginia bluebells that I was outlining here, the lousewort actually is like number 2 when it comes to the importance for early spring species and for queens when they're developing their colonies. So that's another one. If I were to be thinking about the bumblebee community broadly, it would be your Canadian lousewort, and later on in the fall, the swamp lousewort. So yeah.
The rusty patch or any of the others domesticatable or used by beekeepers?
So the question was, is the rusty patch domesticatable or used by beekeepers? The answer is no, because it's federally endangered. So there's like handling requirements that go into that. But there are bumblebees that are used for commercial use, predominantly in pumpkin farms and in orchards. And so those are the common eastern bumblebee and the brown belted bumblebee. So if you're interested, those 2 would be great. I've got the stop, but my contact information was up there. I can get to you.
All right, thank you, Casey. All right, and we will not change subjects again. This will stay related. I think you all are aware that recently fireflies or lightning bugs, depending on what you called them when you were growing up, have been entering into the conversation a lot more. People have noticed a decline in those. You don't see them in your yards the way you used to. And so there's been a lot of narrative about that. And so we thought it might be interested to hear from someone who's been chasing fireflies. And so we will hear from Brandy Dunn, who is an ambassador with the Xerces Society.
Thank you. I like to use my hands when I talk, so requested this. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Support.
Yeah, I hope that's,
That
Yeah,
that
it's
works,
good,
that
yeah.
works.